our dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of our program Africa Today. In today's edition, we are going to talk about the visit by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry to Chad to attend the first ministerial meeting in Jamina about the Sudanese Neighbor State Summit. And our dear viewers, before we start our discussions about this very important topic, we'll be starting our episode with this report. And Egypt accounts for 1/3 of Russia's trade exchange with the African continent. Russia's President Vladimir Putin told the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi during a meeting on Wednesday in St. Petersburg ahead of the second edition of the Russian-African Summit that took place in St. Petersburg 2 weeks ago.
Fattah al-Sisi during a meeting that Egypt accounts for 1/3 of Russia's trade exchange with the African continent. Putin stressed to President al-Sisi that Russia is keen to increase cooperation with Egypt, especially in the promising field of energy, praising the great progress achieved over the past years in the relations between the two countries. For his part, President al-Sisi stressed that Egypt is keen to cooperate with Russia on both the continental level as well as the level of bilateral relations. President Sisi noted that he is certain that the Russian-African Summit will have great results. The president also expressed thanks to Putin for establishing the Dab'a nuclear power plant as well as the Russia industrial zone in Egypt. During the Africa-Russia Summit, the participating countries signed 92 agreements, contracts, and memoranda of understanding worth over $11 billion. In 2022, Egypt exports to Russia surged to $595.1 million, up to 21.6% from 2021. Meanwhile, Egypt's imports from Russia increased to $4.1 billion in 2022, up from 15.5% from 2021. In the first 6 months of 2023, 750,000 Russian tourists visited Egypt, with estimates that the figures could surpass 1 million by the end of the year. According to recent statements by Ambassador to Russia, Nazih Nagori, most of the charter flights between Russia and Egypt have been restored, and 25 to 30,000 Russian tourists visited Egypt weekly.
Actually, the trade exchange between Egypt and the African countries grew by 14.4% year-on-year in 2022 to reach $8.6 billion versus $7.2 billion in the year 2021, according to the data from the Egyptian Cabinet Information and Decision Support Center, the IDSC. More details in the following story by Abir Mitwali.
Trade exchange between Egypt and African countries grew by 14.4% year-on-year in 2022 to $8.6 billion versus $7.5 billion in 2021, according to data from the Cabinet Information Decision Support Center. Egyptian exports to African countries amounted to $6.3 billion last year, compared to $5.5 billion a year earlier, an increase of 14% YOY. The top 5 markets for exports to Africa were Libya, Sudan, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, with values of $317 million, $226 million, $217 million, $191 million, and $86 million, respectively. Construction materials were Egypt's main exports to African markets, with a value of $422 million, followed by chemicals and fertilizers at $385 million, and foodstuff at $224 million. Other exports include electronic and engineering goods, ready-made garments, paper packaging, and upholstery, medical products, crops, textiles, handicrafts, and furniture. This aligns with Egypt's goals to enhance trade relations with Africa and overcome any obstacle that may impede the trade between countries due to the Ukrainian conflict. Egypt is a signatory to several trade agreements among African countries, including the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa.
The UN sounded the alarm Wednesday of impending famine in Sudan, where months of war have hit the flood supplies and pushed nearly 4 million people to flee the fighting there.
The United Nations sounding the alarm of impending famine in Sudan, where months of war have hit food supplies and pushed nearly 4 million people to flee the fighting. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization announced that over 20.3 million people, representing more than 42% of the population in the country, are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. Half that number was already highly food insecure last year before war broke out between Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, who commands the Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces. In a new escalation of an already disastrous humanitarian situation, 6.3 million people are one step away from famine, according to the United Nations. The fighting has destroyed critical infrastructure, severely hampered agriculture, and blocked the delivery of crucial aid. More than half of the population is facing acute hunger in West Darfur, which has seen some of the worst clashes. The latest figures from the International Organization for Migration show that more than 3 million people have been internally displaced, with almost a million more fleeing across Sudan's borders. The IOM figures show that upwards of 2 million people have fled Khartoum alone, 40% of its estimated pre-war population. For months, civilians have been pleading for reprieve from the ceaseless airstrikes, artillery battles, and gunfire that have turned cities, including the capital, into war zone.
Back to our main topic in today's edition of our program, where Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry took part on Monday in the first ministerial meeting after Sudan's neighboring state summit in the Chadian capital, N'Djamena. The meeting aims at introducing solutions in order to settle the Sudanese crisis and maintain the African country's territorial integrity. Addressing the meeting, Foreign Minister Shoukry said that the initiative launched by Sudan's neighbors was the largest proof of their keenness to stand by the African countries to overcome its plight. He noted that Egypt in particular was keen to establish contact among all the Sudanese parties and bring them to negotiations for the way out of the crisis. Egypt's top diplomat is set to discuss with his counterpart from Sudan's neighbors the political, security and humanitarian aspects of the crisis and its regional and international repercussions on the Sudanese people. To shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Suad Chalabi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Chalabi, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Ambassador Chalabi, Foreign Minister Shoukry is taking part on the first meeting of the Ministerial Mechanism of Sudan's Neighbor Summit held on the 13th of July in Egypt that took place, and now he is attending the summit in N'Djamena for the discussion of the situation of Sudan. What's your take on the importance here of the issue of Sudan for Egypt?
Well, as you know, Sudan is the most important neighboring country to Egypt, and what happened in Sudan, the crisis since April has been a crisis to all the neighboring countries, and that is why Egypt has had the initiative in July 13 to hold a meeting, a summit for all the neighboring countries in order to present an initiative to end the Sudanese crisis, together with the other initiatives that has been put on the table from the African Union and from Saudi Arabia. So all these initiatives are linked together so that they provide security and political solution to the problem in Sudan. Of course, it is still a problem to at least hold a ceasefire. Is not able to put to stabilize the situation. That is why the summit has been held to follow up on the ministerial mechanism that has been put in place in Chad between the neighboring countries. That is why we are looking to the meeting to the proposed solutions, which will aim to preserve the unity of Sudan ensure the regional stability and safeguard the country's
Yes.
valuable resources.
Yes, indeed. Ambassador Shalabi, actually, as you have kindly mentioned, the meeting is aiming to introduce solutions to settle the Sudanese crisis and to maintain the African country's territorial integrity. From your point of view, Ambassador Shalabi, how that could be achieved, as yet we have seen some mediations that did not reach until this moment the required aim. So what solutions could be on the ground to end this crisis in Sudan?
Well, the first solution has to be to stop to have a ceasefire, because this is if it continues, it is endangering the humanitarian situation, and of course it is worsening the situation to the extent that the people they are fleeing. The Sudanese are not having the peaceful life in their own country, so that is why they are fleeing to the borders. So the first thing is to establish a ceasefire arrangement between the two factions. The second is to allow the humanitarian assistance to reach the endangered people who are living in camps and who have fled their homes. And third is to have to start a peaceful mediation between the two factions, so that they can reach a compromise in order to have the priority for the citizens of Sudan to decide for themselves, the people of Sudan to decide, the civilians, not the military, because the civilians also have to have a democratic solution.
Yes, indeed. Ambassador Shalabi, also addressing the summit, Foreign Minister Shokri said that the initiative launched by Sudan's neighbors was actually the largest proof of their keenness to stand by the African countries to overcome its plight. How do you see here the efforts exerted by the Sudanese neighboring countries in order to try to find a solution to the crisis, which is representing a threat to the Sudanese people as well as the whole region as well?
Well, this is, you know, that the Sudan was the main producing of crops and of food stuff for the whole continent. It was the main exporter for all kinds of crops. So having this crisis and the war which has extended to Darfur, Guinea, and Fasher and all the regions is not allowing Sudan to export any of the crops, and not also to feed at least their own people. So the region, all the region is going to suffer, and the conflict and its repercussions will affect not only the Sudanese people, it will affect the whole region, all the countries, the neighboring countries, and the international also as well, because those countries who are depending on the exporting from Sudan. So Sudan is a very rich country, not only in agricultural products, but also in minerals and in precious materials. And that's why the war is affecting the resources. The war is mainly for the resources of Sudan, the natural resources that Sudan has, and it has not been exploited yet.
Yes. Also, Ambassador Shalabi, the foreign minister is going to discuss with the Sudanese neighboring country the political, security and humanitarian situation there. How do you see here the way out also for the threats for the security and humanitarian aspects of the crisis here, and how it could be maintained, how it could be contained actually in order to prevent further threats to the whole region.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, yes. If there is a stabilized ceasefire, if there is if the ceasefire is holding, then there has to be. I think the international community all has, and the United Nations has to pressure these factions, the two parties that are the conflicting parties. They have to stop this war, because unless they do that, nothing will not the first step to save the humanitarian, and I mean to have roads, special roads in order to safe roads in order to be able to send all the food stuff. There is a food crisis. There is a humanitarian crisis. How can they? They need medical stuff. They need they need a lot of aid, and the aid is not reaching the innocent people, the civilian people who are suffering from the war. So the first thing is to stop the war, stop the aggression on the civilians, to have safe roads so that the humanitarian aid can reach,
the
and
civilians.
To pressure the United Nations and the international community and all the key initiatives that are on the ground. They have to be able to do something very strongly, commit the two parties to stop the war and to sit on the table to negotiate the peaceful solution.
Yes, we hope this would be reached soon. Ambassador Suad Chalabi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for your precious input, our dear viewers. With that, we come to the end of this edition of our program Africa Today, where we have been discussing Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry taking part on Monday, the first ministerial meeting after Sudan's Neighbor State Summit in the Chadian capital, Jamena. Many thanks for watching.